how do you create events where the people that are your biggest fans are there, and so are the people that are your prospects, and they interact, right? And how can you make those events more about the biggest, creating content about the biggest fans and the aha moments from the new people that are there, more so than creating content around like, check out this sweet party we just had.
Hello, professional property managers. Andrew Smallwood here with the Triple Win Podcast. I'm joined by my friends, Pablo Gonzalez, who was just keynoting this morning live at Narp and Broker Owner. So we're recording here live at the end of a Triple Wednesday. Pablo, thanks for joining us.
I'm just a very big Andrew Smallwood fan. I'm happy to be here.
We didn't even coordinate this morning.
Awkward.
Funny story, a side story.
Yeah.
So we got Pablo a jacket. And Pablo actually got me a jacket, which was pretty cool. It was personalized, custom made. So anyway, it's been fun to get to know you better and see the relationship grow, man.
Likewise, man. I've seen what you and Second Nature does as a company and how you all show up and the way that my keynote was about driving word of mouth. You guys do this jacket thing. This is a real word of mouth thing. This is why I wanted a jacket, so I could prove it on stage and talk about you a bunch, man. So I'm a big fan, for real.
Pretty cool. Where I'd love to start for our listeners is, give them some background, like who is Pablo Gonzalez? What do you do? And, maybe you could include, your role with JWP in that. Yeah,
man. I've just been on this kick of trying to prove community creation as the future of business development for like 9 years. I don't say it's the future anymore because I think it's here. And, started very simply. I was at my brother's funeral and 1,200 people showed up to the church. And I looked around and I thought about those 1,200 people having been the ones that really got us through the 2 toughest years of our life as we battled pancreatic cancer and were really propping up my family in like the hardest moment of our life. And saw them and thought, man, I know that I've been a questioner of my faith since I'm about a teenager, but these people here are my community, and this community is the greatest value I could imagine if it could prop us up like this. And I could never leave this because of the value it provides, regardless of what I feel about my faith or whatever. And they say that in moments of the greatest pain come the greatest clarity. And it just hit me like a lightning strike that I'm like, oh, that just solved for churn. This is no different than me being a client that wasn't sure if I wanted to renew. And I decided I'm going to renew, and I'm going to renew forever because of this community thing. And that identification of it solving a business case, and then my reticular activator hitting and starting to recognize that if I buy a Harley Davidson, I can't go get a Honda motorcycle 2 years later because I'm going to lose all my friends, and that other companies are really doing this stuff, set me on the path of like, man, how does the average company do this thing? And I've just been iterating forward from doing it at nonprofits, to doing it to do business development for the construction company I used to work for, to doing it for a startup, to eventually late 2019, JWB real estate companies came to me with a really attractive problem. And their problem was that most of their new business came from a very expensive lead source, a real estate education program that was like handing them people that were already educated and super high value, but they were really paying high for it, and they saw that as a risk, right? Like them not controlling their lead sources. And juxtapose that to the idea that they're this like really impressive company that gets all this press, had just been on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and they couldn't close internet leads because they just didn't have that figured out. And Greg Cohen, who's one of the founders there and has become one of my best friends, is he's sitting there saying, man, if people just spent some time with us, right? Like if people got to know us a little bit better, people that know the people that we know, they do business with us, but I just can't figure out how to do that. And he tried to go the route of like filming himself doing stuff. He had ideas of like 9 holes, 9 lessons, and like doing golf lessons while filming content and all this like high stuff, but like it really wasn't working. He hated doing it. And he was in so much pain that he decided to listen to somebody with a crazy idea of basically saying, listen, man, I think that you're doing it wrong. Like, I think if you think about your clientele, there are a bunch of really interesting people. Real estate investors all have great stories. And if you can highlight a little bit of of who they are and use that in your content and highlight a little bit about, why they're investing in Jacksonville and like what the city has to offer, alongside highlighting his team and his business and himself, who I think is a phenomenal dude. That's going to work for you much better than you just going out there and trying to like teach the world and like torture yourself trying to do this thing. And the way that we can do this in a way that makes it easy for you to just show up and do it is we launch this internet talk show where we have these conversations with these folks and we repurpose it and put it on social media and put it on a podcast and put it on YouTube. By end of year one, it created a $40 million client acquisition channel, and that, really decided he wanted to do business with me for a long time. and what was really, really interesting is that, this thing did launch a community, had people showing up over and over again. And we built this like 3,000 person Facebook group. But when we looked back in 2021, we realized that 80% of those $40 million came from 30 people. There was 30 people that bought more properties, 30 people that referred their friends, 30 people that when somebody would show up to the Zoom call and they're like, I don't get it, they'd be like, just give me a call, don't worry about it, and help validate things. So it was very clear that what we had was not just a community, but like a word of mouth strategy for convincing clients that, we are the people to do business with, but like showing them why it makes sense to buy turnkey properties and invest in Jacksonville, really also gave the opportunity to like show how special of a company they really are.
So Pablo, I love the personal story that you shared and the impact this has obviously had on JWB, and a different approach of how they go to the market, generate customers, who they're focused on, how they're engaging them in a way that makes real business sense. Something I felt like kind of underpinned a lot of what you're talking about, and maybe underpins community, I'd love to hear your perspective on this, is really an important aspect of communities. There's a strong sense of belonging.
Yeah.
Like when you say, hey, I would buy this motorcycle, but not this motorcycle, not because it goes 2 miles faster but there's a sense of belonging associated with that.
Yep.
Working with this company, buying this product, whatever it might be. Is that the essence of community? How do you think about it?
Yeah. I mean, the essence of community is belonging. And the way that I like to think of it is, to be inclusionary, you also have to be exclusionary, right? Like you have to tell people just as much who they're not than who they are for people to really consolidate around it. And then what community becomes is essentially an exercise in recognizing the value of the people around you and recognizing who else can use that value and making sure that value exchange happens in some way. And for me, every community that I've seen that really works, including the church, it revolves around the stage, because you get leverage when you have a stage to recognize that value, right? So you can have an expert talking from there, or you can have a community member talking from there. And if you realize that someone in your community is good at a certain thing that can serve the rest of them, then you bring them up to that stage as well. So in a sense, it's a game of status recognition and doling out status, but made to serve as you being able to share your value with others and gain value from others in as easy way as possible. And if you can make that happen, then people recognize that I'm here for some good. There's something really in it for me.
How much of this sense of belonging would you say comes from, and what really binds community and make it work?
Yeah.
How much of it comes from like, I believe what you believe, or you believe what I believe? How much of it comes from, I've got a sense of who I'm trying to become?
Yeah.
And actually being around this group of people, it's like helping me towards that transformational goal. Is it both? Or how do you think about that?
I'm going to say the caveat that community can mean a lot of different things, right? For the exercise that we're talking about businesses building community in order to like create value for the business as well, right? Because there can definitely be a community around dudes that love to snowboard.
Sure.
Right? When it comes to the business, I think what you said is spot on. People will unite around a problem that they all believe in, that they all really, really want to solve. And if you can point a vision towards, what this problem is and how it feels, and provide ideas around how to solve this thing that people can get behind, then people will enroll in solving it. And it's not just about showing up as you are the problem solver. It is about enlisting people on a mission, right? Enlisting people in this idea that we can all figure out how to have a better retirement, right? That we call the show the Not Your Average Investor Show. Like we're not people that think that just investing in our 401k is going to get us there. We're not average. We're going to look at other things and we're going to decide what's best for us. And if you can make an intersection between what this mission is, the problem that you solve that helps them get to this attractive state, and then paint what this attractive future state becomes, people really tend to coalesce behind it and want to be a part of it.
I'd love to keep like mapping some of this to the JWB example, not your average investor.
Yep.
So, if you were to say, hey, there's an identity that I embrace, right? So what would that be for the community that JWB, hey, I'm a blank.
Not your average investor. I'm not average.
Not your average investor.
I do not see the world through the lens of what everybody else sees. I'm out here trying to control my own path to retirement and wealth, not just be given the things that everybody just believes I should be doing. And that fits in well with rental property investing because, as you know, when you go to buy a rental property, many people are going to come out of the woodwork talking about how that doesn't really work and how they did it and they got screwed by some reason or another. And at the end of the day, did the cash flow really matter? Did I not pay it all back in taxes? Like those kinds of things. So like this idea of giving people a safe space of just like, yeah, you're right. You have to think different to do this thing. You have to be courageous. And you got to understand that when you win, it's not waiting to buy real estate, but you buy real estate and wait, right? Like we get it. Other people don't. So really going hard at that ideology definitely helps. Like you definitely hear people in our community rallying around this, like, we're not average, right? Like it's a thing that they say, it's a thing that they really, really believe in. It's a thing that we foment as much as possible.
Yeah. You got a rally cry. I like that.
Yeah.
So a question is like, let's think about how I want to ask this. For JWB, if you were defining like their customer profile, they're not trying to work with every rental property owner, right? In the United States, like how would you describe, here's the customer we've decided to serve, how that connects to, is that the exact same profile as the not your average investor community? Is it perfect Venn diagram? Is it different? How did you guys think about that?
When I walked into JWB, they were doing a lot of content that served the real estate investor, right? The active real estate investor that they thought if somebody's active in real estate, they're going to do a flip and then they're going to want to park that money with us. And when we actually looked at their clientele, there was some of that, but there was also a large amount of people that were just W-2 workers that wanted to invest in real estate and did not want to be real estate investors. They just wanted to invest. They did not want to have to stay up with it. And in that regard, we leaned hard at that. We felt like that was the low-hanging fruit for them, because the real estate investor will tend to at the end of the day, their ideal client is somebody that wants to be as passive as possible, right? Like they have their systems in place. They have this like data flywheel. They do things the way that they know because they have their own proprietary data, because of the market penetration that they have in Jacksonville and specific neighborhoods. They've like really widgetized what a rental property is by the numbers. So, they're going to do some things that the average real estate investor is going to be like, wait a minute, I thought I'm supposed to do that. And they're like, no, our data says this. And we don't even want to bother with this conversation, honestly. Right? So I don't know if that answered the question, but this idea of like, we didn't want to call it the rental property investor show. We didn't want to call it the real estate wealth show. We wanted to just like delineate from real estate altogether and make a space for people that want to be in real estate but don't necessarily have to consider themselves real estate investors, because at the end of the day, they want to be the real estate investors. They are the expert that is doing this thing for you, and the more you get in the way, the more painful it becomes for everybody, kind of thing.
Yeah. So it almost feels like the community strategy is a little more top of funnel, and like actually and what I mean by that just is, as opposed to, okay, here are people that are fully like a way they get to fully educated. I've decided to invest in real estate and I want to do it in a passive way as an owner. I'm sure they're getting that right through content, education, community on their way through. But who the community is targeted at attracting is really people who want to invest, again, not your average investor. Is that right? But could be considering all kinds of different asset classes. Is that right? Or how would you correct that?
I would say that the community strategy hits every part of the funnel. I would say that the top of funnel strategy is that let's open the umbrella, let's talk about other asset classes, let's make this a safe space, and then talk about this. But where the community, what we have found is the way that we measure the effectiveness of this thing is that, we run this podcast live every single week, and we measure how many people buy a rental property from them within 30 days of having attended one of these webinars, which we call it a show, right? But it's a webinar, right? So, and today, 35% of new business comes from somebody that was on a webinar within 30 days. And what that tells me is that I don't really care if they became top of funnel because they got a ping of like a webinar is happening, or they were listening to the podcast and that's what did it. What that allows me to do is just understand that in the buying process of investing a large amount of money with somebody that they're going to hold on forever, there is a check mark for everybody, right? Like there's like, is this interesting to me? Do I trust you? Is it for me? That do I trust you check mark is a big check mark to check off. And we know that when people are in a buying decision, attending a show is a major check mark on trust. Because you get there, you can go to a bunch of shows if you want, but like you get to one and you realize that there's 90 other people that show up to these things and 60 of them show up to all of them and they all have nicknames and they're willing to talk to you about it and you're willing to get a third party perspective and we've got nothing to hide because we're showing up here live every single week. And that is something that people are like, oh, okay, cool, check. I can now lay my bed on the pillow at night, right? So it's like, there is the top of funnel consideration. That's why we call it the Not Your Average Investor Show. That's why we put out things like, we'll comment on, we call it Not Your Average Insights, like Silicon Valley Bank melts down, and we'll be like, Silicon Valley Bank just melted down. What does this have to do with real estate? And we'll talk about the Silicon Valley Bank story. And at the end of the day, the moral of the story is always going to be like, what we do is the best way, right? But it basically is like, well, this is what you get. Startups are risky, whereas like boring old rental properties are not, right? Like if you have the right partner, those are top of funnel shows. Then there's a bunch of middle of the funnel, then there's a bunch of bottom of the funnel stuff, to be quite honest, where we're just literally sitting there talking about like why a vertically integrated property management company that signs 2 and 3 year leases instead of 1 year leases is better for you, because you really win through tenant occupancy. And we're like really evangelizing this idea that you want to align some with property management companies that like win when you win, and go ahead and find any of these other ones, knowing that they're going to find one, maybe 2 others in the country. And like we're setting the buying standard for that. So now it just like depositions everybody else, right? Like it hits on every part of the funnel. The magic of it is like, how wide you can cast the net at the top, and how skillful you can be at driving the narrative from this wide net down like a Price is Right Plinko board into like the right Plinko thing that you win the car with, Yeah. I don't know. Did you watch Price is Right when I say Plinko?
Yes. I was imagining the hockey puck making its way down
to the car. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I like what you said. It's got me thinking differently about, it's not just pulling in people top of funnel and educating at a very high level there, that really there is content community engaging people wherever they are. And I'm sure there's even existing clients that are probably a part of that, and maybe they're buying more. It's actually expanding post acquisition. Is that right? Yeah.
So when we start evangelizing how good the market conditions are in Jacksonville to existing clients via the show, that reactivates whole clients, right? So yes, there is also part of the content strategy that is like, this is attractive to anybody that's like in a buying decision, but it's also attractive to like remind people, hey, like you've put this money here before, it's still good over here in these waters, and there's all this other upside that's still left over. So yeah, absolutely. And quite frankly, those were the first pings that we realized, right? Like when we first started the show, the first thing that made us obvious that like this thing could work was that we were bringing on old clients that hadn't invested in a while. And once they come over and they remember how awesome Greg is and how great the great team is, they're like, and why aren't we doing more of this, right? Like, so, that the guests on the show as clients really was the thing that kind of like kickstarted the flywheel as far as measurement and knowing that this was something good to invest in. And it was only like 6-8 months later where like the people that had been tuning in for 3 months were like, all right, I'm ready. And they started raising their hands and started doing it. So like it took a little while to get to the point where it became so attractive. But once it tips, it's like a snowball.
Now, a couple things I want to ask you, Pablo, to help make this tactical and practical. Because I feel like there's a good coverage here of, hey, philosophically, here's a different approach to this. Yep. Here's clear business benefits and a shining example of this working really well.
Yep.
How you would measure success. Like a lot of good stuff we've covered.
Yep.
I'm just imagining, I don't even have to imagine, just me sitting here and thinking about, okay, well, like, that's great. If I've got a budget to hire someone as passionate and exciting as Pablo Gonzalez to help me run this play, right? And, you know, I've got the size and scale of a JWB. Somebody looking at that today, you know, at 6,000 units and everything else there, it could be easy if I'm just imagining if I'm a property manager and like, maybe I'm in a place where, man, I'm trying to decide like, can I hire my next RTM or VA, right?
Yeah.
And it's a tighter spot. It may feel like, oh, can I invest into something like this that is going to take some patience and time?
Yep.
And here's where I'm at. Like, what advice would you give that person if that's where they're at?
Yeah, definitely, man. Listen, it's not just advice I give that person. It's advice I had to create for myself, right? Like I've been talking to a bunch of people here. They're like, man, so do you like just do this for a bunch of people? I'm like, you'd be surprised at, you know, I guess there's this belief around you can be an entrepreneur and you can like strike out, and then you hit a home run and it's on. And I'm like, yeah, but what if you hit a home run the first time that you did this and you never learned to play baseball? Like that was me, right? Like it really all worked out very well. And I'd be lying if I told you that the immediacy of the effect was not also super cooked by COVID, right? Sure. Like this idea that all of a sudden people looked for places to belong and we were standing there with a bag, the idea that everybody was freaking out and we were having a press conference every single week was a big accelerator of this, right? So in trying to reverse engineer how someone can really build up to this thing, what I found is the best way to like test this in a small scale is number one, you really got to get that point of view piece right. Like you really got to get that thing of validating how your clients see you in their eyes, understanding what their world is, understanding what the problems are in there and how they manifest, understanding how you fit into that solution and how they live once you fix that with that part of it, right? So doing a point of view, which I'm happy to kind of like share with the audience. We can leave it in the notes or whatever. I have like a point of view exercise that you can run yourself that you can do it.
And can you do maybe like here's a 60-second version framework? Yeah. You know, a POV or point of view. Mm-hmm. What are the pieces that are elements?
Yeah, I've said it a couple times, right? Yeah. It's the formula is new context creates a missing, which will need an innovation to solve it. Now you have this like differentiating thing, right? The category. A point of view is that put into a story. So it starts off with how the world is, right? Hey, we know that right now the average person in retirement age only has around like $300,000 saved up. And the median person has like $100,000 saved up, right? Like it's, or the other way around, right? Like people are not getting to retirement the way that they want to get to retirement, right? And the people that are behind feel like they can never catch up because at the end of the way you're taught to invest in growth stocks for a certain amount of your life. And then as you start getting older, you start investing in like cash flow things. So you lose your growth potential and you can only live off of the cash flow of the growth stuff that you're already invested. And by the time you're retired, you can't risk that stuff, man, or else you're screwed, right? And the way that looks is, you know, if people get to a certain age, they're replacing less than 50% of their income. They're not able to retire. There's daunting statistics around this idea that generations, you know, millennials, Generation Z, boomers, like they are losing faith in their ability to retire. And even worse, we're living to be 100 now, right? So like you're gonna have to live longer off of that money. But what if it didn't have to be that way, right? Like that. So that is the world as it is, the problem of the world, and how those problems feel, right? And so that's the first part, and you got to nail that, right? If people don't agree with that, then they're not hooked. Right? Like if you don't get that right, then they're just gonna be like, well, this isn't for me. Okay, you can go talk to somebody else. But if you get that part right, then you can be like, well, it doesn't really have to be that way. What if you can invest in something that actually grows in cash flow and continues to grow and grow in cash flow over time? And the older you are, the more options you have from it, and the more it grows by itself, right? That is what rental properties represent. So, if you can find a way to help people invest in rental properties without having to become real estate experts and without it having to be so hard and it being as easy as buying a bond or buying like a stock or whatever, now we're cooking with fire, right? Like, and that's what JWB has built. Right. So that is the point of view right there. Like, I got to get you hooked on this idea that you don't like your options for retirement right now. You feel behind, but you also don't want to be a real estate investor. If I can find some way to like do this, then that, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the point of view piece, right? If you can nail that part, right? Like if you can sit down and get that right, the next stage to see if like you have a good, propensity for one of these like kind of like community and content strategies is now go interview your clients, right? Like go talk to your 10, 15 favorite clients and like walk them through this talk track. Just like asking them questions to see if they, in their own words, how they phrase the thing they're talking about. Be like, man, we're seeing this problem. Are you seeing this problem? Yeah. All right. Tell me how you see it, right? Like have them say that stuff and record all that content and get it at every stage of the point of view. And if you can do that and it kind of matches what you're saying, now you've got this like really rich content that you can use in the bottom of a funnel, in the middle of funnel, and in your advertising, right? You can now make a little compilation point of view video. You can now make compilations of like the world as it is today, and you being like, yeah, we know the world is that way. That's why we built our company this way. And you can have all these different like validation points of like people agreeing that like on the other side is this lifestyle, right? So, and then you can chop that down further and have like hundreds of pieces of social media content, right? That to me is like the minimum viable product of doing this. That's the test. That's the MVP, right? Because if you do that, you're getting resonance. You make that video, you're able to distribute it. That starts giving you some positive feedback. You put that into your lead nurture sequences. You put that into your ads. You put that on your web pages. You're putting that on your social media, and you start getting people really starting to resonate. Particularly the fact that your clients are on it and you can tag them on it, and they can be like, "Oh yeah, look, this is me talking about my life." If that stuff works, then you have the foundation for really doing this thing, and you don't have to go all in at once.
So just to recap, a couple of key steps
that
you laid out there. So one is developing this clear POV, right? That has, whether it's a narrative or you've got these elements, right? And pieces to it, clarified, put together. Second is, okay, you can start to put those on your website and your email nurtures, or get that out to people, your existing clients, right? Engaging them in that, amplifying what they're doing to reach some other people. And if you start to see, you should be able to start to see traction from that. That gives you a little encouragement to keep going and enough fuel to say, okay, now can we start to make other investments, whether it's a podcast or a Facebook group
or going to events and running events that follow this thing, right? I call, the next step, the next investments is what I call experiential content marketing, right? Like how do you create events where the people that are your biggest fans are there, and so are the people that are your prospects, and they interact, right? And how can you make those events more about the biggest, creating content about the biggest fans and the aha moments from the new people that are there, more so than creating content around like, check out this sweet party we just had, or like just the keynotes that you're getting or whatever, right? So that allows you to continue to validate this. And how can you moderate conversations that are one part about the person you're talking to, and then how their life intersects with this point of view. So that you can, the conversation can always have a part of that point of view being a part of it. And then you continue to make content that way. And if you're getting really good at reverse engineering, showing off the people that come to the events and like what they believe that intersects with yours versus just the experts that come, then that content actually drives more people to your events, whether it is an online event like a internet talk show or webinar, or whether it is NARPM, right? Or which is how, you guys use this very effectively, right? Like your best clients are here. You make it obvious that your best clients are stars, and all the other people that aren't your clients yet are like, yeah, I want to be a star too, right? You do it with these things and everything that you're doing, right? So it's like a very similar methodology, and then creating content with them so that can scale beyond just the room that it's in, and throw up a bat signal of like, hey, you get to meet this kind of person, you get to have this kind of conversation at these events. That is what will drive people to show up and be part of a community.
And if I'm like a local business, and it's, let's say, hey, it's not NARPA, I'm right in a second nature example, but there's local BNIs there. I think of you, Pablo, as like, you're an excellent networker, and like what I would just say is you're a relationship driven person. You're a natural connector. And, I'm curious if there's advice you would give to people of, hey, if you're thinking about building your network, being a connector, what are some of the things as an individual that they might do that you've done to, I can share my own experiences with you, but I'm just curious what you would offer up as like, here's some of the things I've done that have been really effective.
I've been in this conversation a lot in the last 8 hours, right? Because this really was me for a long time, right? Like, number one, as a network, I can give networking tips all day long. I think that what you're asking me is like, how do we take this new kind of approach of like experiential content marketing for yourself, right? I've had a bunch of conversations with property managers today that have come up to me like, yeah, man, like, this is me. That's what I believe in even in Jacksonville, but I believe this a little bit differently, right? Like, or I am talking to people that want to self-manage. So what I would do is be showing up at these local real estate events and talking to people that self-manage, and I'd be asking them about like their experiences, and then be like, man, what's the biggest mistake you've ever made? Like, what was the moment that you wish that you were going to quit real estate and you almost didn't have? Like, what is the most angry your husband's been at you because you had to go do something in the middle of special time, right? And then having those conversations with your cell phone out and a selfie stick and just like recording that stuff and be like, man, that's really cool. Yeah. He had this moment. That is the value of like having a good partner or not having a good partner, right? Like, just if you can get into these like networking conversations, if you can create your own point of view, right, of like what you believe in and why things work, and you can get into conversations with people based on the point of view, not based on what you do, but based on like the problem that you see out there, and see how they resonate with it and how they respond to it and how they've solved it. And, be like, if you get in a good one, be like, oh, that's really great. Can we record this real quick on my cell phone? And just be like, man, you just said this. Tell me that story again. And then when they finish, just be like, yeah, man, that's exactly what I was thinking, because, the world is like this and then that and then blah, 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 blah. That stuff is actually surprisingly effective content for Facebook and LinkedIn when you're like tagging others and be like, met this guy, has a great experience. This is what he said or she said. That's really the minimum viable product. I've been doing that since like 2017, and then I only realized, and like when Greg said, yeah, man, buddy, let's go. That's when I built an operation around it, because I promised him something I didn't know how it would deliver from like an operational standpoint. But that idea of just like showing up with your selfie stick and maybe a couple of lavs if you want to spend $80, is not a big deal. And, highlighting others while you're networking and, like testing out that point of view to see if you resonate. Let's get in the conversation about it and record it, start distributing that kind of stuff, purposefully going to places where the people that you do business with is there so they can be part of that conversation, right? Like, I think that's pretty low hanging fruit for people.
All right. So Pablo, with the time we have left, what's something we haven't talked about yet, but that you would feel would be the most valuable thing to share with the audience?
I was shocked when I started having this conversation with Greg about, kind of like how they share their value prop, and pitching the city itself is something that hadn't crossed his mind. I thought everybody would be on that stuff, right? So like, I think as a property manager, you can go out and compete with everybody as much as you want. But if you're not familiar with why it makes sense to invest in your city, then you're missing the boat in like how you expand a tent of people that are interested, right? Like showing up in a room and talking about, man, this is how I run a property management company, is way less interesting than showing up in a room and be like, did you know that when 10,000 residents reach a downtown, it hits a tipping point, and now the downtown starts to go from 8 hour to 16 hour. And when a downtown goes from 8 hour to 16 hour, properties around the downtown starts to increase. Well, guess what? Jacksonville, they're going through that right now. Did you know that? Right. So, that's gonna, the host of Bigger Pockets is here, right? He's gonna be way more interested in talking about that than me talking about JWB, right? Or even in Jacksonville itself, people that are from there don't realize how good of a real estate investing market it is. So like walking into a room and having that conversation gets people to like raise an eyebrow and be like, oh, really? Tell me more about this. And that's gonna feed the whole like, oh, I went from uninterested in real estate to interested in real estate, or I went from interested in real estate to interested in real estate in Jacksonville, or interested in real estate in Jacksonville, but not for me to, I gotta get in this, dog. So, like I think getting like real familiar on what the economic drivers are in your city and how to promote that. And then, if you get really good at that, how you get involved with that and actually like become part of the solution and become part of the economic development. Man, I think that is something that if I was a property manager, I'd get real serious about being known for.
Yeah, like what I'm taking away from that is there's this choice consumers have to make of, am I going to choose this brand or this company, right, to work with? It's a different choice to say, am I going to work with a professional property management firm or manage myself? It's a different question to say, am I, like it opens up the TAM, the addressable market of not just, here's who's already currently invested in this city, who's going to make a choice to continue to invest in this city or choose for the first time, right, to invest in the city. And here's why, right? And having that discussion of you're not just buying a specific house on the street, but you're investing into a market. Here's the dynamics that are going to drive property values over a long enough, full market cycle.
Yeah, open the aperture, man. Open the aperture.
Cool.
Yeah.
Pablo, thanks for sharing. Always a pleasure, man.
Pleasure's mine, my friend.
And that wraps up another episode of the Triple Win Property Management Podcast. Thank you for pressing play. We hope you've gained valuable insights and inspiration.
The Triple Win Property Management Podcast is proudly produced and distributed by Second Nature, where we believe in a triple win, building winning experiences for your residents, investors, and your teams with the only fully managed resident benefits package. Visit secondnature.com to learn more and talk to an RBP expert in your area.
If you have any questions, comments, or want to weigh in on the conversation, we'd love to hear from you. Email triplewin@secondnature.com. That's triplewin@secondnature.com.
Stay connected with us beyond the podcast. Visit our website at secondnature.com to stay updated with upcoming property management events and articles.
And don't forget, you can keep the conversation going in the Triple Win Property Management Facebook group. It's exclusively for property managers.
To receive even more valuable insights and updates, subscribe to our newsletter. You can find the link to that and much more in the show notes.
On behalf of the Triple Win community, this is Laura Mack, thanking you for tuning in.
And on behalf of Second Nature, this is Carol Housel. Check back soon for another exciting episode.
Until then, keep striving for that triple win.